Hello and welcome to this Foster Care Institute online training webinar. The challenges that foster youth face while enrolled in schools. I'm your host, Dr. John DeGarmo, founder and director of the Foster Care Institute. I'm an international speaker and trainer, best-selling author of many foster care books, and a foster parent myself to over 60 plus children who have come through my home and been a part of my family. Indeed, I did my doctoral studies centered around the challenges that children face while in school in foster care. I was a teacher prior to becoming a foster parent, and I recognized pretty quickly after becoming a foster parent that most schools and most teachers are not equipped to care for children in foster care in the classroom. So we're going to look at that today during this webinar. Indeed, our goal is to increase awareness of school-related issues that foster youth face. We're going to increase your awareness of the challenges that permit youth in foster care today from being successful in school, both in academics and in behavior, and gain an understanding of how to develop strategies and implement those strategies that are going to help youth in foster care be more successful while in school. Now let's look at a study in Iowa that found that there were roughly 12,000 children in the foster care system. The age groups were 1 year of age, 4.1%, 1 to 5 years of age, 27.4%, 6 to 10 years of age, 16.1%, 11 to 15 years of age, 23.5%, 16 to 18 years of age, 28.5%, and 19 years of age, 0.4%. I bring this to your attention because if you note 11 to 18 years of age, over 50% of children are in the foster care system in that age group. So you can see right here that this is the age group that's struggling in school. Same state ethnicity, if you broke it down, blacks were 15%, whites 70.1%, American Indian 2.2%, Asian 1.3%, Hispanic 7.9%, and unknown 9.2%. The average length of stay in that state is 18.5 months, which is roughly the national average. And 40% are reunified within 12 months. Indeed, the national average is 50% of children in foster care are reunited. For youth in foster care, they generally perform lower in academics. Indeed, they are 18 months behind academically on average and struggle with reading and math skills. And they have more behavioral problems than your traditional student in school. Now, why might a child be displaced from home, and what happens to that? Well, when a teen is taken from their home and placed into a strange home or strange environment with strange people, much like the staff you're working with, and a new school is introduced as well, this can be incredibly challenging for youth in foster care. For these youth who are placed in this strange environment with strange people, school is the last thing on their mind. What's on their mind is survival. They want to survive. They're not concerned about Romeo and Juliet. They're not concerned about algebra or geometry. They're not concerned about biology or chemistry classes. They're not concerned about world history. They're concerned about survival. Before we go any further, it's important to look at why a youth in foster care might be placed into a foster care environment such as the one that you work at. Well, there are many reasons for displacement. Children and youth in foster care are placed in the foster care system for reasons of physical abuse or sexual abuse, neglect, medical neglect. Perhaps their parents are incarcerated. Perhaps they were abandoned. Perhaps truancy. Death in the family. Juvenile offender. Runaways. And there are those times where sometimes a child might ask to be placed into a foster care home. Indeed, over the years, I have had homeless placed in my home, teenagers. I think about a 17-year-old teenager who was homeless. I think about the 13-year-old who ran away. I think about the 14-year-old who voluntarily placed himself back into foster care. Today's child welfare agencies truly are overworked, overwhelmed, under resourced, understaffed, undersupported, and underpaid. What child welfare agencies do generally is they investigate cases of child abuse and other reasons for teens being displaced. And they place those youth into foster care homes and foster care environments, and they try their best to provide support. Support for the birth parents, support for the children, support for the foster parents, and support for staff. Yet, they had nothing to do in regards to schooling. In order for youth to be successful in the foster care system, they need to have support. Foster care support systems often support each other with supplies and resources and respite to let them know that they're not alone in this. And that type of support is critical for teenagers' success. We're going to look at that type of support group later on in this webinar. Now, why might youth in foster care be 18 months behind academically? Why might they struggle with reading and math skills? Well, the truth is, youth in foster care face particular emotional and educational challenges while at school. Particular challenges that those children and youth in traditional families often do not face. There is a lack of specific educational background information given to the teachers, given to the counselors, given to the administrators, as well as given to foster parents and caseworkers for every youth placed into the foster care system. I think back upon the days when I was teaching English and history in a rural school system in the state of Georgia, and I was given no background information whatsoever when I had a teenager placed into my classroom who was in the foster care system. Indeed, I had no clue about the foster care system in general. I believed the many myths and many misconceptions associated with the foster care system and the children and youth in the foster care system. And most teachers feel the same way. They believe the myths and misconceptions associated with foster care, associated with those teens in the foster care system. Myths and misconceptions that the teenagers are bad kids, that it's their fault they're in foster care system, that they must be in some way troublesome. So when a child is placed into a classroom, a high school or middle school classroom environment, many times the teachers simply do not have the background information they need in order to meet or best meet the youth's needs. The problem is that there's a need for adult involvement, and there's a need for a creation of a network between staff, such as yourself, between teachers, and between caseworkers. And this need needs to be done rapidly. There needs to be a rapid building of relationships with the foster teen because they could be displaced to another environment at any moment's notice. Let's look at a few examples of some youth in foster care while in school. I think back to the time where we had a 13-year-old boy placed in our home, and we had to enroll him in school. He was enrolled in school, was only there for 3 days before he went to a next placement. There were no records for the school. There were no transcripts for the school. And after 3 days, he was moved to another county. Those 3 days he was in school were a complete waste for him. I think back to the time where we had a teen placed in foster care in our home who needed special tutoring services. And our rural county could not deliver those special tutoring services through the school system. So therefore, that teenager needed to be driven to a different city, a neighboring city, in a neighboring county, which not only drained our time and expenses for everybody involved. The 17-year-old girl who was placed in foster home for 120 out of 180 school calendar days before being placed into a residential or group home. For 3 months, there were no school records. There were no transcripts. Schools had a very difficult time placing this 17-year-old girl into the appropriate classrooms because they did not have her records or transcripts. There was no background information with her whatsoever in regards to school. As a result, the school was unable to address any sort of learning disability she may have had as well, simply because there was no background information. And sadly, this is quite common for youth and teens in the foster care system as they move from one setting to the next and from one school to the next as well. Finally, I think back to the time we had three boys, three brothers all placed in our home, and each of them had a different sort of learning disability. Again, there were no records and there were no transcripts. Children suffered from malnutrition, they suffered from neglect, and this malnutrition and neglect hindered their school progress. After 4 months, they were sent back to live with a grandmother and encouraged to learn on their own. When a youth is placed into a foster care environment and he goes to a brand new school, many times those school records, those school transcripts do not follow them to the next school. Therefore, the school has a very difficult time placing a child into the appropriate classroom setting. This can be tremendously destructive for a teen who is struggling in school. So, what happens when that teenager is displaced from their home, whether it is from neglect or abuse or abandonment? What happens to them when they're displaced and placed into a youth environment such as the one you work at? Well, as we know, it's a very traumatic experience. You can put aside all of the abuse, the neglect, the anxiety they may have experienced before being placed into the residential home. It is a time of great trauma. It is a time of great anxiety being placed at where you work because there's emotional upheaval. They now have a new home and they have to figure out the new rules in this new home. And they have to figure out the new parental figures or authority figures, such as yourself and other staff members. Many times, these youth will experience something known as separation anxiety, where they're feeling anxiety being separated from their family members, from their mothers and fathers, perhaps their siblings. And every time they go to a new school, a different school, there's a reminder placed upon them that they are known as a quote unquote foster kid, a label that no one wants placed upon them. Yes, at a new school, most likely it'll be found out by their school peers that they are in foster care, and most likely they will be ridiculed or mocked or made fun of or pointed at because of this label. As a teen moves from one place to the next, and to the next, and to the next, known as multiple displacement, there are emotional, psychological, and social effects every time they're moved to another location. Indeed, their mental health is threatened each time they are displaced. And they fall further and further and further behind academically. When they move from one home to the next and from one school setting to the next, their academic performance falls further and further behind. Indeed, their academic performance is generally lower than traditional students. As we noted earlier, youth in foster care are on average 18 months behind academically. Is it any wonder they quit school? And when they move to a new home, and they move to a new setting, and they move to a new place such as the one you work at, and to a new school environment, well, many times absences begin to pile up in the school. And there is a lack of transcripts and school records. And many youth suffer from learning disabilities in foster care. Again, as noted, youth in foster care generally struggle with reading and math skills, and the schools simply do not know what classroom to place them in, what sport services to place a child with. As noted, their math and reading skills are weak, and many youth in foster care also struggle with language developmental delays. Is it no wonder that there are high levels of misbehavior for youth in foster care while in school. Indeed, the dropout rate is high. 55% of youth on average will drop out of high school when they age out or transition out of the school system or the foster care system. As a result, 65% will end up homeless, 75% will end up incarcerated after dropping out of the foster care system, aging out or transitioning out, and dropping out of high school. As a result, homelessness, unemployment, incarceration, and lack of skills. There is a procedure that schools go through when they enroll a new child into the school system. To begin with, most likely when a family moves to a different school environment, a different school location, if you will, first thing the family does is they go to the board office to enroll the child into the school system. Next, they go to the school itself to enroll into the school. And perhaps there might be a brief counseling session for the child before classes begin. None of this supports children and youth in the foster care system. For many youth and teens in the foster care system, they have a lack of trust. Not only have a lack of trust with perhaps the staff members or other adults in their lives, but they also have a lack of trust or understanding when it comes to regards to relationships with teachers. As noted earlier, teachers simply do not understand the challenges that youth face in the foster care system simply due to lack of exposure or lack of knowledge or lack of information. Teachers are not equipped to care for children in foster care in their classroom due to lack of understanding about how the foster care system might work or the challenges that youth in foster care might face on a day-to-day basis. Again, teens have a lack of trust with these teachers. Many times, teenagers have no healthy relationship with any sort of adult, including teachers. And as they move from home to home or foster care environment to foster care environment, multiple displacement truly hinders youth developing healthy relationships with any adult. Much like today's caseworkers, today's teachers are also overworked and overwhelmed. There are more responsibilities placed upon teachers. Responsibilities such as doing lunchroom duty or hall duty in the mornings, perhaps after school duties such as sporting events or extracurricular activities. There's more and more paperwork for teachers due to the higher level of accountability. There's more testing today than ever before. Teachers now have to prepare more for their classrooms. There's more grade accountability. And again, there's those additional responsibilities, and there's the ever increasing behavior issues within the classroom as well. Today's teachers truly are struggling in the classroom and in the school. As we noted earlier, today's teachers are not equipped to handle foster youth in their classroom. I went to college to become a teacher. In no time, in no way, was I trained in anything regarding foster care. There are no resources for today's new teachers about foster care. Many teachers may not even be aware that the child in their classroom is in the foster care system. I did not when I first became a teacher. And sometimes schools may not even be aware. When a teenager moves to a new environment, a new foster care setting, much like the one that you work at, and they go to this new school environment, as noted earlier, many times they do not have any transcripts from their previous school. No school records of any kind, no background information. There's a lack of confidentiality. There's a lack of information on the educational needs or the special needs or the support services or the abilities of that child when enrolling in a new classroom environment. As a result, there might be placement issues, and many times there's a lack of communication between the caseworker and the staff that you work with the caseworker and the school. As you can see, there needs to be strategies created to best aid our youth in foster care while they are in school. So they do not become one of those statistics. They do not become one of those who drop out of school when they age out of the system. They do not become homeless. They do not become incarcerated. So, how can we help? How can we help our youth that we work with, the youth that we care for, the youth that reside in the environment, the home that we work at? How can we help them succeed in school? How can we help them not become one of those statistics? How can we help them not slip through the cracks of academics and not struggle in school in regards to behavior? Let's look at this quote from Hoffman and Leake. We cannot teach students if we do not know them well. I love this quote. Let's read it again. We cannot teach students if we do not know them well. Our teachers today do not know our students from the foster care system well. Therefore, they really cannot teach them. As somebody who works with youth in foster care on a daily basis, you need to be their advocate. You need to be the one fighting for them in school. You need to be the one cheering them on in school. You need to be the one lifting them up and encouraging them to graduate from school. And some of the ways you can do that is to update the school on any problems that they might be having. If a child is struggling in the residential home, they might take those emotional struggles to the school. You can help them by updating the school on any sort of problems. Encourage contact between the residential home and the school. Provide resource materials to the school the youth go to. Resource material that might give some insight into the challenges that youth in foster care face on a day-to-day basis. Now, many children from traditional families have parents who are involved in the school in a healthy fashion, in a positive and productive way. The youth that you work with, the youth that live in the home, do not have parents who will be doing that. Therefore, it is up to people like you to provide regular contact with the teachers. Let those teachers know the educational and emotional background of the youth that you're working with. When teachers have some insight into some of the problems and some of the challenges and some of the anxiety that the children and the youth in their classroom are facing on a day-to-day basis, if they have some insight, that brings understanding, that brings awareness, and that helps the teachers become an advocate for the children as well. Any good, honest teacher will try their very, very best to help children who are suffering if they know that they're suffering. As I noted earlier, when I first became a teacher, I had no clue about foster care. I had no clue about the challenges youth in foster care face, and I had no clue how that involved the school. When I became aware of some of the challenges that some of my students were facing, my heart opened up and I was more lenient, more understanding, and I became more of an advocate and more helpful for those youth in my classroom who were in the foster care system. That's what the teachers need from you. Provide as much emotional background information to the teachers, as much educational background to the teachers, and deliver information to school counselors and the administrators about any type of discipline or learning disabilities the youth might be experiencing or might struggle with. Again, this needs to be done by someone like you. So stay in regular contact with the teachers. Provide that emotional background information to them, deliver information, and ask for academic updates, perhaps weekly. Also, request any behavior updates as well that the child might be struggling with. Ask the teacher, ask the counselor, ask the administrator to contact the home that you work at if the youth is struggling in school in regards to behavior. If there's a behavior problem in the school should be calling you or the fellow staff members. So you and the staff members are aware of it before the teen comes home from the school. Again, ask for regular academic updates. You have this right to do so. One way you can advocate is to reach out to those teachers and ask for any progress or problems. Let the teachers know what a visitation is like for youth in foster care. For example, I had 3 brothers in my classroom. On Tuesdays, they would drive 2 hours to visit mother in jail, spend an hour with mother in jail, come back 2 hours later, and arrive at my house at roughly 11 p.m. As you can imagine, homework was non existent that evening. The next day, there was a great deal of anxiety in the 3 boys as they were recalling the visitation with their mother. They could not focus on their schoolwork due to the emotions involved of seeing their mother in jail. On Thursdays, they would travel 2 hours to see their father in jail and 2 hours back. And again, they would arrive at 11 o'clock at night and school work was non existent. As you can imagine, on Fridays, they were thinking about their father in jail and all the emotions involved in that. And again, they could not focus on school. So there, 4 days out of 5 days in school, schoolwork was not a priority for these children. Their priority was seeing mother and father in jail and all of the emotional upheaval that went with that. I did not understand any of that before I became a foster parent. Teachers do not understand the emotional anxieties that can be involved in visitations. So let your school know what it's like in regards to visitation. Ask the school if they could be more flexible when it comes to schoolwork on days of visitations or perhaps the following day. There should be no tests or quizzes or major assignments on the day of a visitation, nor should there be the following day if it's an emotional visitation. Ask the school to be flexible in that regard. Most teachers, when they understand the unique emotional challenges that youth in foster care experience and the unique challenges that visitations might bring forth as well, most teachers will be more understanding and more flexible when it comes to any sort of schoolwork on days of visitation. You might need to ask your school and your teachers to have alternative homework assignments as well. Can you imagine what it might be like for a youth in foster care to write an essay about their family or their family tree? That could bring forth even more trauma and anxiety. So, for instances like that, you might ask the school if they can provide an alternative. All lines of communication need to be open between you and your work and the school. The school and the teachers should have the residential home's email address, phone numbers, and physical address. And you should have the emails and phone numbers of the teachers. All lines of communication need to be open so that if the youth is having an emotional breakdown of sorts or behavioral problem of sorts, the school can quickly get a hold of you. One way you can advocate for the youth in the school is to be seen and be heard in the school itself, in the 4 walls, by being a volunteer. Perhaps volunteering at sporting events, perhaps going to the school and helping out in other ways. Not only does this help the school and the teacher, it also shows the teen that you care. that there is an adult in their life who is interested in their schoolwork. As an advocate, you are advocating for their best interests in school. Help them, if possible, when it comes to homework. Help them, if possible, when it comes to studying. Help them by putting away all distractions, maybe setting up a school homework center in the home. Encourage them to have the very, very best sort of behavior socially while in the school, and help them meet their academic needs. Ask your teachers to give you academic updates. If they're struggling in school, perhaps they failed a test, or they're failing the class in general, or their grade is slipping or dropping, ask the school and the teachers to let you know as soon as possible. If the teacher should see any sort of unusual behavior, if they should observe any sort of unusual behavior in their classroom, or perhaps in the cafeteria, or in school in general, ask the teachers to be proactive and to contact you and the home so you and the home can be prepared and equipped and ready when the youth returns from school. In all honesty, teenagers are going to spend the majority of their waking hours Monday through Friday with teachers. By the time they wake up and by the time they get back from school, the majority of their day will be spent with teachers. Ask teachers if they could be a listening ear for that student. Perhaps there is a teacher that's formed some sort of relationship, healthy relationship, or bonded in some healthy fashion with the student. Look for some teachers to be positive role models for the youth. Ask the teachers to give respect towards their students. And ask the schools to use discipline techniques that actually correspond and work with the youth that you work with. Many youth in foster care struggle in school behavior-wise because schools are not equipped to address the anger management issues or the reactive attachment issues or the oppositional defiant disorder issues that the youth might be experiencing. So ask schools to use discipline techniques that work for the youth that live in the home. Again, many of these school systems will not be prepared to do so. It is up for you to advocate for the youth in this regard. Now, relationships between teachers and students and traditional students can be challenging to begin with. So it's important for our teachers to find out a little bit about the students in their classroom. Many youth in foster care are not going to be forthcoming in talking about their experiences before moving to the home. Yet again, I point out to you that when a teacher becomes a little bit aware of some of the challenges a youth may have experienced before being placed in the foster care setting, their hearts will be opened up. They'll be more understanding towards the student. They'll be more patient with the student. They'll be more flexible with the student. They'll be more willing to work with the student. They'll be more compassionate towards that student. So let the schools and teachers know a little bit about the student in their classroom. Ask the teachers to pair up your child, your foster care youth, the teen that you're working with, and I call him your child because you're working with this child on a day-to-day basis, and this child, this youth, is like one of your own children. Ask the teacher if they could possibly pair up the youth in foster care with some other students in the classroom anytime the youth might miss some schoolwork when they get further and further behind. Whether it's missing school because of visitations, or court, or therapy, or counseling, or whatever else it might be, youth in foster care often miss days of school, more so than traditional students. Ask the teacher if they could help the kids, the youth, the teenagers, by pairing them up with another student to help them with their missed work. When it comes to building relationships between teachers and foster care, this can be very challenging. It can be time consuming. And for many teachers, it takes great thought and responsiveness. For many youth in foster care, there is a lack of trust, and that can be an issue when trying to succeed in school because they do not trust those teachers. Let the teachers know why. Let the teachers know why the youth might not be trusting. The youth might have some sort of emotional barrier in place which could hinder or slow down the learning process. Ask teachers to create specific lesson plans or help them develop certain reading cues for the students. Ask teachers to engage in conversation with the youth and ask them to trust the youth. Many teachers are very, very wary, and I talked to you about this as somebody who was a teacher, who worked with other teachers in a classroom setting. I recognize that many teachers do not trust youth in foster care because of the ugly label placed upon them. They labeled that these are difficult children, these are difficult teenagers, these are troubled teens, so to speak. So encourage the teachers to place some faith and place some trust into the teens in their classroom. This may take additional time to be sure. And ask the teachers if they would be an advocate for the youth in the classroom. Most teachers will say, absolutely, they will. As staff members, we need to come together with our teachers and we need to come together with our caseworkers to develop a team effort to help the youth in the classroom. It's important that we have reasonable expectations, reasonable academic expectations when it comes to youth in foster care. Most likely, they will not be getting 4.0s and all A's and B's. We need to have reasonable academic expectations. Again, most youth in foster care are 18 months behind academically and struggle with reading and math skills. So we need to make sure we encourage all kinds of academic success. Any sort of success they might have had. If they had a 20% on a quiz and the next time they got a 40%, we need to celebrate that. If they got a C on a paper or a 70%, and the week before, the paper before, they got a 50%, we need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate and encourage all sorts of success in school. And we need to encourage the youth to behave in school as well. Again, we need to have reasonable expectations when it comes to behavior. For those youth in foster care, school is the last place they want to be. They want to be home with mother and father. They want to be living in that traditional setting. Despite all the abuse and neglect they may have experienced, most youth in foster care want to be home. They don't want to be in a foster care environment, and that carries over to school. So we need to have reasonable expectations when it comes to their behavior in school. And we need to encourage and celebrate when they behave appropriately. As noted, it's important to form a team of staff, caseworkers, and teachers. And we need to network with them. It is up to you to form that relationship. It is up to you to form that support team because teachers are too busy to do so. Caseworkers are too busy to do so. It is up to the residential home to help to develop that relationship. When you do meet with the teachers, have some sort of agenda in place. Talk about future plans. Ask the school if you can be part of the decision making when it comes to the student and their future in the classroom. In addition, provide resources and material about foster care, about the challenges that youth in foster care might experience, so the teachers and the counselors and the school administrators are familiar with it. When a teen is placed into a new school environment, ask the school if they'd have a new foster student protocol. A new student foster protocol might be something that allows the youth to have special services, that encourages the teachers to be more understanding, that provides information about the teenager's background. that allows a teenager to go to perhaps a safe space, if you will, maybe a school library or the gymnasium or a music room or an art room when they're struggling with their emotions, when they had a difficult visitation or they had a difficult conversation with their birth parents or caseworker or whatever it might be, when their anxiety levels up, ask the school if they could allow that youth to go to a safe space. Again, an art room, a music room, a gymnasium, a library. As noted earlier, it's important that you have the emails and phone numbers of the teachers and they have yours as well. Perhaps you could write a mailing list to your schools and teachers where they can mail information to the home in regards to the students' academic work if they should miss any work. Conversations through Skype or texting with the teachers as well on a regular basis informs the teachers in the school that you are involved, that you are fighting for this youth success, that you are their advocate. When you have a meeting with the school and the counselors and the advisors and the teachers about the youth, ask for another meeting. Ask for the time, the date, and place for the next meeting. And bring an evaluation form that teachers can use based upon the child's unique conditions. We have evaluation forms and so much more in the book Helping Foster Children in School, a guide for foster parents, social workers, and teachers. This is an excellent book, not only for you and the people that you work with in the home, but for the school as well. Perhaps this is a book that you would like to donate to your youth's and teens school. We have that and many other best-selling books at the Foster Care Institute available for you. For much more on this topic, we have many articles about schools and teachers and classroom success for youth in foster care at drjohndegarmofostercare.com. Simply type in the Foster Care Institute as well. Follow me at Facebook at Dr. John DeGarmo, the Foster Care Institute, and at Twitter at Dr. John DeGarmo. And any questions you might have about this topic or anything else, please email me at drjohndegarmo@gmail.com. The greatest advocate that teenager has in school is you. You need to be fighting for his academic success. You need to be cheering him on. You need to be his biggest fan when it comes to academic success in the school. You need to be encouraging him to graduate from school. You need to be helping him alongside when he's struggling in school. And you need to be the listening ear when he's having a difficult time. So I want to say thank you. Not only thank you for watching this webinar, not only thank you for taking time to understand this challenge, but thank you for being his advocate. Again, statistically, 55% will drop out of school when they age out. 18 months behind academically, struggling with reading and math skills. He needs someone like you fighting for him. For the Foster Care Institute, I'm Dr. John DeGarmo.